I think Cameron would love to send his child to the most expensive
Mr. Cameron
school.
to you.
Mr. To the most expensive school in the country. He's doing this to try and win favours, just like he's bought all his Facebook friends or whatever you do when you want more Facebook friends. And the thing is, what's his postcode, you know? And how good is that state? I bet he's got a fantastic state school in his postcode. I would love to send my daughter to the local state school, but they are terrible in my area. So I think it's just more...
So you don't think let's make it, you know, we're all in this together, he's one of us, he's supporting the state system, I feel that, you know, he's on side?
No. He's trying to make us all think he's not as posh as he is.
I think that you're being really, really cynical, because I really think that a man and his wife using their child for political gain, I think, you know, I really...
think politicians have done that since the beginning of time.
I really don't think that he would play with the education of a 10-year-old girl. I applaud it, because I think that he's going to be the first Tory Prime Minister ever to send his child to a state school, just as Michael Gove was the first Tory education minister.
I'd be impressed if he sent her to my postcode. The school in my postcode. Come to my postcode.
Let's not nitpick about that. It's the message
that
that
is important, Janet. That is important.
Well, let me finish. It is important that politicians practice what they preach, and they're building a state system, education system, which Michael Gove and David Cameron say they want to be as good as private schools. OK, they've got a long way to go, and yes, it does depend on your postcode, but they've got to encourage people to use the state system, because only by using the state system will it genuinely improve. And by the way, one of the schools on the list for his daughter to go to is my old school. And I'd like to think that David Cameron's watched this programme and thought, hey, Janet's done all right. I'll send Nancy to Lady Margaret. Look,
for the first time in a long time, I do agree with you, Janet, on this. I know, it must be because the sun was shining yesterday. No, I do agree a lot, actually. But I do agree with her, because it's quite nice now to see a politician practising what he preaches, and they've been preaching about they want to bring state schools up to the level of private schools, and he can't win either way, because if after all of that he had have sent her to a private school, we'd all be going, oh, and they're going on about state schools. And as far as the postcode thing goes, that happens everywhere. I mean, my Kira goes to a state school and it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, but
well,
that's okay if you
lucky.
have got that fantastic school.
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel at a disadvantage, because obviously my kids are in the Scottish system and I don't know as much about the English system, but I mean, there's all the thing about schools that you have to be the sort of church schools. And Michael Gove's daughter, I think, is going to a church school.
She still had to be selected.
Well,
and you can't tell me they'd rigged that selection for a cabinet minister, because I just don't believe
selected on what basis?
You are selected on... They interview the kids, and all the schools have different ways of selecting them. Some schools
not
just
a state
use...
school.
Listen, some state schools in towns like Brighton use lottery system all around Britain, because there are so many kids want to go to the same school, they have to use lotteries. So, I mean, it is problematic that the system is uneven from postcode to postcode, but let's not denigrate someone for choosing to send their daughter to the school that 95% of the population have to send their children to state schools. So he is giving us a good example.
Well, I mean, Janet, you know, you said that Nadia was being cynical. I kind of think you're being a little bit naive. And I mean, it's not that I would criticise him for it, but yes, the child is going to a state school, and I do think that is a good thing, because I do think the state system should be supported.
I just don't believe anyone would tamper with their child's upbringing to that extent.
Well, if they lived in Nadia's area, and I know, you know, as a friend, that you've had problems, you know, with the kids in schools and stuff.
I'd be really impressed if you sent it in my area.
If the option is not there for a good school, if you could say, I can send my child to a state school and I know it's a good school. As me, I'm in a very privileged situation. My kids go to state school because they're great schools. I don't have a decision to make. If they were not great schools, then I would be a bit more troubled.
But let's not make this an argument about the left or the right, because I've lived in the same street as Labour politicians, and they have gone through all sorts of hoops to get their children to schools right outside the catchment area.
I absolutely agree with you.
So it's gone right across all political parties, all our leaders, set no example whatsoever when it comes to choosing their children's education. If they've got the money, which, let's be honest, if you're a cabinet minister, you're on a pretty good salary and loads of pension and expenses, you can afford to send your kids to any school.
I've had people say to me, well-off people say to me, oh, well, listen, you can afford it. Why don't you just get yourself a bedsit in such and such area where there's a fantastic fantastic state school there. That's what we've all done. Nobody ever checks up. And they've rented a bedsit to get their kid into the good school because they worked out that actually financially they can save more money and they can go off on this holiday. There's a lot of fixing and mixing going on.
But I loathe private education. I loathe it. Because I'm a classic example of someone who came from a working class background and went to a state school and did well and then went on to university where 95 out of 100 people have been privately educated. And it was only by having my education, a state education, that I could hold my own.
Yeah, I think it also points out, though, that, I mean, we put a lot of focus on schools, as we should, but a lot of a child's future is determined by their parents, the support that they get from their family, and the wider kind of catchment. If they're in a school where most of the parents are involved with their children and, you know, are caring and supportive, they've got a much, much better chance of doing well. If they're not, and, you know, chaotic lifestyles being the sort of phrase that we use, then it's much more difficult for a child to come through that kind of system.